So our first week in value goes back to here, right? We were looking at value in terms of the wide range that you can achieve from very light to very dark. We're looking at how artists use value in their artwork. We were talking about squinting. You had a choice in your classwork to make either two value scales or showing how or breaking down how artists use very lights, very darks in their artwork. Okay, so that was um, right after Thanksgiving when we got back from the break. And then those artworks were choices you had were like um, drawing and shading realistically a tiny object, balancing digitally darks and whites that you converted from a color photo and kind of balancing all that in a good composition, or taking a photograph, which was a tonal value scale. Okay, so that was where we started with value in this unit, which was to really focus on that range from very light to very dark and having a good artwork that sort of balanced all that stuff. Okay, now the second week was, oh, let me go to the right slide there. The second week's choice board was about high contrast value and how you can put very light, very dark right next to each other in a high contrast way to not only bring a lot of emphasis to your artwork, but we also talked about that idea of no tan, which is to balance harmoniously um, darks and lights. And our week was really centered around Banksy and street art and social issues, but it also did, kind of, we brought in that no tan option and just the balance of lights and darks in popular culture. So then this week, we're talking about value as most people are really kind of feel like it's most important in a lot of ways, which is to show form in an artwork. And form relates to three-dimensional illusion, okay? Because we're not actually going into the third dimension. We're talking about the illusion of three dimensions. So let's watch this pretty awesome little video here.
These paintings are all examples of the genre of art called trompe-l'oeil. Translated from French, trompe-l'oeil literally means fools the eye. It's a style of art that makes you question if what you're seeing is real. It's this illusion of depth that artists create, which tricks our eyes. When shapes get this third dimension of depth, they become forms. Form is one of the 7 elements of art, along with line, shape, texture, value, space, and color. When given form, circles become spheres, squares become cubes, triangles become cones or pyramids. Form takes up space in either a real or implied way. In paintings and drawings, for instance, form is implied because it's an illusion of 3 dimensions. With sculpture, on the other hand, form is real because it takes up 3-dimensional space. Visual artists use light and shadow effects to create the illusion of 3-dimensional form. A strong sense of form can also be created by increasing contrast between highlights and shadow areas. Street artist Banksy uses this technique a lot. Notice how these human forms are made up of only white, black, and one shade of gray. Sometimes form can even be created by an artist's use of color. Artist Akash Nihalani often juxtaposes brightly colored forms against neutral backgrounds to create the illusion of depth. Notice his forms don't incorporate any shading at all. These are just a few ways artists create forms and incorporate depth into their work. What are some other ways that artists create form? Is there a particular style or technique that draws you in and catches your eye? Mastering many different approaches to making form will give you unlimited options when creating your own artwork and will enable you to fool viewers' eyes in any way you choose.
One of the thing, okay, well, that's actually fine timing. Oh no, I need to go use this stuff. Just kidding. Oh, there's Zach. Okay, so one of the things that I like about that little video is that, well, first of all, I like that it emphasizes the importance of value in creating form, but it also emphasizes that we're talking about the illusion. And then it shows a whole bunch of really cool examples of the illusion. Because it is quite different when we're talking about sculpture versus two-dimensional. And that's why value is so important, and being able to manipulate and control that range of value, that place that you're using it. And like the best examples I can think of that is like how those the ones on the sidewalk, those illusions on the sidewalk are all about where you're positioned in relationship and how the artist is using shadows and highlights and so on. So it is really important to, kind of analyze all that stuff and get really comfortable with light source and that controlling your range of value as an artist to control that illusion of depth. So this week's choice board is really about that idea of controlling value, your range of value through blended shading. Okay, so we're getting into a lot of shading things. There is one photographic option in the artwork, but first we're going to concentrate on our shading skills some more. So I have two options that I'm going to show you today, and I want to work through those first. And pretty much it's going to take the rest of class here to demonstrate that, but it's important and I want to show it to you. So if you just glance at the two classwork options right here, you're going to see that one of them is a value scale. And a couple of you chose that option a couple weeks ago. You could do value scales once a week for the rest of this year. As an artist, you would benefit every time. So, it's one of those things, it's a skill that you would benefit from doing over and over again. So if you already had that option if you already did that option before, you still can do that, especially since this combines shading of a sphere with that also. If you didn't do the shaded value scale, you probably are going to want to, but you don't have to either. Both of these are going to be successful, whichever option you choose. So here is the first choice for classwork. That needs to be changed to 1216. I'll do that. For this choice, create a value scale in pencil or on your iPad that is either 6 inches long on paper or fills your iPad screen. It progresses smoothly from white to black with the full range in between. Utilizes blended shading technique and is smooth and mark-free, no color. Okay, so this is slightly different from the last value scale assignment in that it has a lot of specifics. Earlier, I was just like, do two, they have to be different materials or tools or techniques, but that was it. So I got some that were like this big, some that were in color, which was totally fine. But this time I'm being a little more specific. You have to make it 6 inches or filling your iPad, black to white, blended technique only, which is the kind that's on this slide. There is no segments, no steps. It's smooth transition and no color. So only pencil or on your iPad. And this is not an or, and you're going to draw and shade a sphere with a cast shadow with a clearly established light source. I'm going to show you those in a minute. This slide has two videos, which might be helpful to you, and you should certainly look at them if you choose this option. And then here's the reflection questions. So I have never used an app to create a value scale before. So I've had two periods so far today. These are the two that I have tried. They're terrible. So this one in the middle is, oops, this one in the middle is the first one that I tried. And there were some good things about it. I was like, all right, well, I didn't have time to finish it because it was really, this is really challenging to me. So I started it. I'm like, I'm learning things. That's good. This one, second period, I tried to use a different, this is pencil, the tool that I'm drawing with right now. This is charcoal. Let me just tell you that I don't think it's a good choice. Like maybe you'll do better at it than I am, but I really struggled, and that is interesting looking, but it wasn't working. Like I couldn't get it to get light enough. So then I tried other things like a smudge tool and this and that. It was a disaster. But I don't really find that a problem because the good thing about Photoshop is that I can do stuff like switch to an eraser and just ditch it, right? I'm going to leave that there to show my other classes how terrible I was. So, but I don't let Photoshop get, or mistakes like this get to me, because it literally isn't the end of the world. You can just turn it off and start again, like don't get freaked out about that stuff. So I did start again. In my free period, I was practicing because I was like, man, I got to get my act together, or people are going to start to wonder. So, uh, but it's hard. It's hard because the things I think that I'm identifying that make it easier for me to do this on paper is that I use pressure to control. Um, that's a real problem there, that line. I'm going to draw another one. I use pressure to control how oh, I forgot you can't draw with that very well. How I manipulate value. So in this app, it's been very difficult for me to effectively shade because I'm so used to blending with pressure. Now, you may not have that problem. So this would be white. It's getting extremely messy now. See, so what I've done to get it that light is to put my flow, I should put my flow down to almost nothing down here. Oh, another thing that I've decided to do is to just shade in one direction, because when I go back and forth, it just gets too heavy. I need to get rid of that. I need to change my eraser first. Hold on. So my eraser is 100% hardness. That was a bad choice. So I made it soft, and I'm going to change the flow. All right, this might be better. So instead of erasing like a still erase the super hard line, let's make it down even lower. Okay, maybe getting somewhere. I look forward to sharing my value scale, my digital value scale with you guys later, because seriously, this is very challenging, and I like a challenge, but my goodness, I have not been good at this today. Okay, so this is getting better. Tips from me. You're going to want to really play with the flow. You're going to want to kind of draw in one direction, almost like a paintbrush, I think, and pick up your stylus in between, because if you don't, if you go back and you have to undo, then if you're just going back and forth and never picking up your stylus, then you will have to undo large parts. Okay, so the big things here is that you are layering, and that's what I'm about to show you in pencil on your on paper. So this is an option. Coming in and working this in Fresco. I would not use Photoshop. Photoshop does not have the versatility in brushes. Okay, that's my best start yet. And I'm exhausted now. I'm just kidding. But that is my best start yet. That's rough. I had some really good submissions when we did this, right after Thanksgiving. People in my classes that did some really nice blended ones on their iPad. I give props to that. It's really hard. Okay, let's switch now to the other camera. So make sure that you can see this screen. which will be my camera over. Yeah, I know. I did it on purpose. Okay. So make sure you can see this one. I've got myself a little, oops, wrong way. Setup going on here. You can see I've got, there we go, a sphere and paper, and I'm just using today regular Ticonderoga pencils. So I've got my paper, I've got a ruler. If you don't have a ruler, it's not a huge deal. You could just use like the edge of, like a straight edge of any kind and draw yourself a line that's about 6 inches long. Let's see how I did. Not bad. 6 3/8. So then here's a nice trick for you. You could measure, but look what else you could do. You could just use your ruler. Go like that. Use the width of the ruler, which is about 1 inch. Now you have yourself a value scale. I would like you to set up a value scale like this and not have to have this little miniature one like we did the first time. Okay, 6-inch value scale is what we're looking for. Okay, so now for a blended value scale that you're drawing in pencil on paper, you want it to go light to dark with no breaks, smoothly transitioning from one end to the other. So for this, there are lots of ways that you can do this effectively. I usually start with my darkest value on one end, and I might use my pencil like I'm holding it pretty regular, what I would consider regular right now. You know, like I'm gonna write with it. And I'm pretty much just like boxing in the corner and the end, and then I'm gonna kind of start to, I don't want any lines, so I don't want to make this super edgy down here. Just want to start to like fade it out a little. Okay, being careful of lines. Then, next thing I want to do is lay my pencil down. I'm going to go back to the other end. And this time, you may have seen or heard this technique before. It takes a little bit of time to get used to it, but it's really very effective. Like we drew in the beginning of the year by holding from the top. If you hold from the top and the end, you can use your hand to just very lightly shade, almost so lightly that you might think that I'm not shading at all, which would be a very good compliment. Okay, so I'm just going to start very, very lightly applying the pencil across. It's almost like I'm applying it across the paper. And I'm going to move my way up the scale, trying to be careful not to let any lines pop up. So I'm being even. And as I get to about the midpoint, I know that I'm safe to apply a little bit more pressure. Same thing as I move up here. Like I know that it's going to be getting darker. So I can apply a little bit more pressure, but I'm still trying to keep it quite smooth. Sometimes you want to make sure that your surface that you're working on is clean. This morning when I worked on this first period, there was something on my table under my paper and it made a bump and a mark that I did not like. Okay, so now you can do a combination and hold your pencil however you feel comfortable, but I'm holding mine like this, so I've got a pretty severe angle going, and that's just allowing me to blend nicely. I find that if I hold it very vertically, that I sometimes get lines. So as long as I feel like I have control, I'm gonna lay it down. And I'm just going back and forth. Now, it is true that it is much easier to lay down more value than to take it away, generally speaking. Okay, so like, you know, this is true if you've ever tried to mix a paint color and you added too much dark into it, and then you're like, oh my gosh, and you try to like lighten that color. It takes tons of white to lighten a color. It takes very little black to make a color darker. Okay, so maybe at this point I'll go like this: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that means that I need to start, you know, kind of evening it out. Who remembers how we evaluate the value of something in the art room? How do we check and see if it's progressing evenly or where the darks and lights are? How do we do it? Anybody? How did you check? Well, you have, like, looking at your iPad and mine, how can you tell? Do you remember the technique I taught you last week? Maybe you might be doing it without even realizing. Remember the technique of squinting? So if you're squinting at my value scale, how is it proceeding? What stops at 2 or 3? So I need to smooth down here a little bit. Remember that the camera might not be right in here. Yeah, you might not be able to see the edge fading out. Okay. Thank you. It's my 3rd one today. See, look. Let me squeeze out. It's my 3rd one today. I am not a professional artist, but I am old. I'm a professional art teacher. Actually, that's it's a good point that you do keep in practice the more you draw. And I have drawn more in this year than I have in the last 20 put together. Yeah, because, of circumstances between COVID, and then also a lot of people, I think, have gotten more in touch with their creativity or their athletics or their whatever their hobby is this year. And that's benefited me a lot. But yeah, thank you. Okay, so drawing a sphere. A lot of people are like, drawing circles are so hard, and they go like this, and they're like, that is not perfect, but it's as good as it's gonna get. You are not expected to draw a perfect circle. That's not something that most people can do, especially with one line. But you can't just be like, wow, look at that dumb, uneven circle. Oh, well, and then go ahead and start shading. Okay, so this is how I was taught to draw a circle in college. Believe it or not, you pay thousands of dollars and they teach you how to draw a circle. You're going to draw this circle with like nice fluid roundness, knowing that you are not going to be able to draw it symmetrically with one pass. Our brains just don't work that way. Okay, it's very difficult to draw something in symmetry from one side of your brain to the other. Like it just doesn't do that. So you draw the best you can, lightly, then you come in and you restate, which means draw again, the good lines, and you erase the bad lines. Now, I have gotten better at this in my life, but I always have flat spots or bulges. It helps to look at it from different directions and stuff like that, okay? Then I usually have to go through and kind of lighten and pare it down some more. But I've never drawn a circle in perfection with one line. Nobody does that. Okay, so now I'm going to really look at my sphere up here. One of the things that you need to remember is that there are no corners on this form or shape. So none of your shading can be like super edgy or defined. It's got to follow that principle that this is a round subject. Also, some people get this thing in their mind that the brightest spot is going to be on the edge and there can't be anything, you know, sort of taking away from that. But you really want to look at your light source. And remember, this is going to be blended shading. So the first thing I usually do is very, very lightly look at where those dark and lightest areas are. So the darkest one here, and I'm holding my hand like this with my pencil in the end. So there is a very dark spot down here. And then the shadow is going like this way. It's going rounded around like this. It's going to fade out over here. There are bright reflections kind of in this area. And then the super brightest spot is up in here. And then a little bit of reflected light over here and along the bottom. Can you see what I've drawn there? Okay, so I've just identified some of the highlights and stuff, and now I'm going to start shading. So I've got my value scale right here. So I can look at this and be like, oh, that part in there, it's about a 3 to 4, because it's a white subject. Excuse me. So it's not going to be super dark. Okay, so I'm just shading this pretty softly. Like I said, none of it is going to come to like a harsh line. Okay, I'm struggling with how to hold this right now, but I think I want to keep it on the side. I'm going to shade up the middle. This is the darkest part right over here. Right now, I'm like, can't help it, I'm picturing this like a moon. So this is the dark side of the moon over here. And then it's fading out. My pencil's got a flat spot. I don't like it. You have to be really careful. Oh, by the way, I haven't said this yet. We are not blending with our fingers. We're not smudging with our fingers. So please don't do that right now. Some people really like that technique, but we're not doing that right now. So use your pencil and shading only. Ooh, look how pretty this is down here. So we have the edge of the sphere. Oops, sorry. The edge of the sphere. And then this just comes right down close, but doesn't quite hit. Oh, I changed my light. Did you see that? Okay, so I'm getting my way through here. This just kind of fades out. I don't know if I'll be able to finish this all the way, because I don't think so. But it's a pretty good start on one. Now, from this angle, the cast shadow starts up about here. And over here, it starts right about here. And then it's just kind of going off. It hugs it pretty close and pretty clean. And that's good because it'll help really pop out that edge. So let me put that in there, and then I'll start to look closer at some of the other stuff. Usually the edge of a cast shadow can be very crisp. It can be also very dark, but usually it's not like black hole dark, okay? But some people like to, by accident, overcompensate and make it that way. So really look at what you have in front of you. It may not, it probably is not black hole dark. So really look close. And I'm not going to finish that shadow. I'm just going to pull it off here so we can see where it was. Okay, so now looking at this, is there a part I needed to get darker? Well, I need to pull this down a little bit. I made that too big, that reflection. Okay. And then even that out a little bit. I think there's a little bit of a dark spot up here where it's rounding around. Just think about it too with your head. If it's rounding around up there, then probably I need to add a little bit of shadow. If you got a little heavy-handed, you can try your eraser if you're super sure it's not going to smear it. So I know that this eraser that I have is a good quality one, and it's also clean, because even a good quality one can smudge things if it's dirtied up. Also, your finger can smear when you're doing that, so be really careful of that too. Because we're not going for any kind of smearing. All right, so I think I could give this a little bit more attention, but it's pretty close to done. I'm gonna need a little bit in here because I don't want an outline showing where that is, but I need to blend that better. Okay, so is everybody kind of on board with what this assignment is and how to do that part of it? Oh, I forgot, I gotta turn off this camera. Any questions on this? Okay, because now I just have to show you what the other one is. There's no demo involved in that one. Okay, so for the other classwork one is a shading exercise that does not require any observation. Because for this one, what you're doing is following kind of a prescripted method of creating a composition and then shading. So for this one, if you see, it says follow the steps that left to create a shaded form drawing. Use pencil. This one I don't want you to do on the iPad. Use pencil and the blended smooth shading technique. Fill the page with 6 to 10 triangles. Complete the reflection question slide and attach clear image. Don't make it too tiny. Look at how great these look. The background is, these have been cut out, I believe, and put on black paper. You do not have to shade it like that. So you're using that method of building triangles and then you're flat shading, blended shading, the different planes of the triangles to make that illusion of three-dimensional space. Yep. Let me go back and show you. So here you go. Look. So you've got two choices. That one I was just showing is called the abstract shaded design using triangle method, which is kind of a handful or a mouthful, I might say. And then the other option is that what I was just showing today, the smooth value scale in pencil or iPad blended technique and a sphere. So those are due by Wednesday. Tomorrow is a work offline day on old work or this assignment I just showed you. And then Wednesday check-in, Thursday artworks and more demos. Can you do what? Yes. Would you like me to